Welcome back to part two of kind of how to deal with toxic people, how to how to understand your pain body, how to understand shadow, and that blind spot that we all have. So, in video one, we really kind of addressed we're being hit from all different types of angles from others, from the world at large, from humanity, from ourselves. And I kind of think of that quote that says, witness, don't absorb, um, is really good to start off with, especially for empathic, intuitive people who have put their energy outside of themselves to try to create and navigate safety. So, all of our patterns, kind of happened in childhood, but we can also develop patterns, being anxious, being antisocial, through a course of a lifetime. And if you need counseling, if you need a therapist, if you need a medication, go get that. Uh, but a lot of you don't need it. What you need is some clear information and to take responsibility for yourself. And especially if you're using the big disclaimer is there's too many people out there using spirituality uh uh inappropriately. They're trying, you know, God isn't going to save you from your mental disease. God isn't saving you from your chemical imbalance. God isn't saving you from your addictions and you diving deep into pleasure and avoiding your life. God isn't going to save you from making the wrong choices, choosing the wrong people. Uh, that God is within you, and you need to clean the temple. So I kind of have some ideals, and one of them is humanity in its creation is capable to handle itself. It doesn't need a savior. It doesn't need a god. It doesn't need an angel. It doesn't need another mysterious entity being channeled through a person. It doesn't need more technology. It doesn't need a lot. My belief is we were made whole, perfect, and complete. So, what is wrong, right? Just a whole bunch of crap, a whole bunch of buying into a story that you're not okay to justify inappropriate behavior. It's a lot of fear. I'm letting people treat me like crap because I'm afraid I will lose security. That could come in the form of shelter, it could come in the form of food, job, resources, loved ones, a parent. And so you might have been giving up yourself, your energy, your your authenticity in order to have needs met at a very young age. And that's a horrid situation. But guess what? That's all in the past. And so you don't need to drag that forward. So getting to understand your pain body, getting to understand your blind spot, and learning how to release that baggage. When it's all said and done, it's baggage. And your baggage can get heavy and it's stopping you from having a moment to moment beautiful life. Ebb and flow, things swing back and forth, you know. Uh but generally you should all have the gift of joy daily. You should all feel gratitude and appreciation for who you are and for existing. These are some hallmarks, these are benchmarks in health. Like, why live if you're not happy? So, really, what most people have is too much baggage stored in their energy body and it's weighing them down. It's stopping them from staying connected to their heart. It's stopping them from making reasonable, rational decisions. It's stopping them from their goals. And so let's now get into this a little deeper. Observing coworkers, observing my crazy sister, observing other relatives and friends and their relatives and their parents. And, after, you've lived for a little while, you've witnessed enough experiences. And I'm always marvel at like how much energy someone has on a certain subject, you know, and they'll open their mouth and they'll say all this stuff, whether it's anger or they'll drop down and cry, play the victim or the martyr, or they'll keep trying that act over and over and over again. And I'm like, where does all this energy come from? You're so violent, you're scary. Of course he'll get out of the way. You can go left even though you're not supposed to go left, you know, on that type of light, or okay, you're mad dashing to work like a speed demon. And where does all this energy come from where you're willing to turn me into an object and just blast at the wall, blast at me? It's not even me. At this point, you look insane. And it doesn't seem like all things are functioning well. You know, you got heat sinker missiles locked on me, but you're not going to be satisfied because I'm not the real one who's bothering you. What? So I always wondered, where does all this fuel come from? And I've discovered through a little bit of self reflection, oh, so that's the pain body. And we just carry it around and it's silent and heavy the more you put into it. And it's agitating and it's anxious and it's just there. Sometimes it's very solidified and silent and dense like a rock. Sometimes it's a little bit more active. But then we link that together with being triggered. Something set so and so off, and then they feel like they need to, and they might try to release that energy, that tension through speaking a bunch of swear words, releasing that pressure, and then going back to the task at hand. Then they stay in that dead end job, or that relationship. So sometimes you can be internally triggered and internally blast off at yourself, which where you might go into self beat up mode, say horrible things about yourself, compare yourself to like supermodels and compare yourself to winners, and then you've dissipated that energy kinda, and then it settles back down and you're stuck. And you just seem to loop, you just seem to cycle, you're stuck, you can't get out. And there's a dynamic going on between this energy of pain body and your identity, your sense of self that you've accumulated. So, being a non form, infinite being, you start identifying and attaching more and more and more with your body and with your family and with the time that you exist in and the experiences that you have. You're building a healthy ego. But then if you keep absorbing and attaching and identifying with and dragging forward your past, it can get a little too identified with, a little too structured, a little too formed, a little too rigid, a little too locked in to a character. So, for different reasons, you might want to do that for a time. You're raising a kid, and for the first 5 years, it would be a good idea to be locked into the mommy identity. But after that, that kid has survived you for like 8 years, you want to loosen up and be you again and not lose yourself in the role of mother. Same with a partnership. Maybe for a few years, I would say 3 to 5 years. Once again, you want to be totally locked in and enjoy the experience of being a partner, of being lovers on that. But then you want to break the mold, grow a little, become more yourself, let the other person become more themselves, which is probably what will keep your relationship going. And then meet each other as individuals who love each other as partners, but really respect the individuality and the freedom. And then that's a whole nother ball game. And so it's being locked into a mode, you know. And then signs that you're too locked into a certain mode is you feel heavy, you feel tired, or you feel stuck, you know. And who is telling you this but someone who's experiencing all this? Hence, a need for self reflection and understanding. Now, meditation is my way, trying to dissolve, trying to just be silent, trying to just sit with myself, sit with my feelings, sit with the experiences, and let the information flow in and let the ahas come to me. That's self reflection. You know, you can do it hardcore or you can just be relaxed about it, sit on the couch, journal. But through self reflection, you get insights, powerful insights that evolve you. So, the powerful insight I'm sharing is okay, I'm now really starting to understand things. People are owning conversations that don't belong to them, experiences with friends, families, and whatever that don't belong to them. They're filling their head with all kinds of stuff, and they're filling their bodies with emotional stuff that's not necessary. And then it starts living them. So you feel triggered. So we don't know what this content is. When it's not being rubbed the wrong way, it's pretty much like a sleeping dog, you know? But then it hears something, or it smells something, or it senses something, or it's had a rude awakening, and you find out that dog really wasn't sleeping, in fact, or it was, and then it viciously goes after you. And it doesn't have the mental capacity to understand the full experience, you know? Those aren't robbers in the house. That's your neighbor who's actually bringing over a gift for you, you know, a surprise gift. The dog doesn't know that. It just senses intruder alert, you know, a rude awakening, unpleasantness, and it goes off of those primal instincts. So some of this pain body, some of the things that trigger us are non-reasonable, non-logical. They're part of instinct that have been built up over generations to keep humans alive, you know? So of course you're gonna get irritated with certain tones of voice. You're gonna get irritated when people are too close to you. And it's harder and harder and harder as there's more and more people occupying smaller spaces. So we come up with this thing called, you know, social etiquette and rules and laws to help navigate. It's actually to help pacify and keep soothed this primal force that lives within all of us. It's not logical, but it's root chakra energy, okay? It's lower 3 chakra energies, and it's about survival. And it doesn't rationalize the full spectrum of color. It's just seeing things in black and white. Yes, no, good, evil, pain, pleasure. I live, I die. So you see this how simplified. It's not even reasonable anymore. It's instinctual. And so this needs to be called out that a lot of the conflict, a lot of the things that are triggering us have a root in a deep instinct that's genetically encoded for survival. Has it outlived its use? No, but we need to understand it, maybe tame it, work with this force instead of having it ruin our relationships, ruin our careers, ruining our abundance. No God in the universe is going to take that away from you when it's there for a reason. It's also that motivating drive when you need it. So, moving on. So, I've objectified this thing called ego, and I drew a tower, and then I drew this thing called pain body, and then I imagined multiple light sources, and the multiple light sources' shadows crisscrossed. Where they crisscross is your blind spot, and so much more. There's your blind spot. There's your wholeness. And these are 2 objects that have been created, the ego and the pain body. And then there it is. when you're caught in a cycle, when you're just reacting. So this reaction happens because you were triggered, pain body is activated, and all those words come out of your mouth. Or you just leave the office. You're triggered. You might go into run, fight, freeze mode. Aren't those primal instincts? Yeah. So we are complex, beautiful, yet very simple creatures. Through simplicity, we'll understand the complexities, and now we need discipline. So, what's not part of those three lower chakras is awareness. Kind of detaching and going into witness mode, watching yourself react. Oh my gosh, I was reacting. Oh my gosh. So you're watching your thoughts. Yeah, of course I thought Jenny was gossiping about me. And that's what I thought. Those are the conclusions in my head. So watching, or, oh my gosh, here's these thoughts of not feeling attractive. No one will want me. I'm not a supermodel. Of course you're not a model. Quit comparing yourself to others. Or or why am I trying to solve all my coworkers' problems, up till 3 a.m.? Boy, did I absorb a lot. So, hearing your own inner dialogue, hearing the narrator, hearing your thoughts, watching yourself think, watching yourself feel, watching yourself react is how you access your third eye. You can kind of, you're accessing deeper and higher a quality of your existence. And so you're like, okay, if I'm going to play the game of life, I'm going to have a physical body. I'm going to have an ego. I'm going to have a personality. And if it's not well, if it's weak, it's going to have a lot of mental and emotional problems that are beyond the scope of self-help. Okay? You're going to have to develop a sense of self. How does that happen? I find people who didn't have any sort of shelter and structure when they were younger are susceptible to not strong enough egos. People who are always catered to also don't have a strong ego. Ego you could just call structure. They didn't have enough structure to create healthy boundaries of a me versus you, an inner environment and an outer environment. A me that's able to combat inner conflict with the inner self. So the conflict with self, conflict with others, and conflict with the environment. So we're all fighting a war within, we're all fighting a war with each other, and we're all fighting a war with our environment. That's 3 wars going on, people. Do you expect everything to be happy? Do you expect everything to not every once in a while get out of order and crazy? So you have to learn to flow with it all. Laugh at yourself. But anyways, moving on. So one day we're having like a meal at my parents' house. And my sister says something about old white men and how bad they are in leadership positions. I am over on the couch. I look over at my dad. He's old, he's white, and he's actually been providing for 8 kids for like 50 years. And he's been basically playing dad to this person I call mom. And then my mom took in my sister's kids and she raised them there at the house. My dad provided all of that. My dad is old and white. I was adopted. I'm looking at his biological daughter, who's white, overweight, dysfunctional, living in his house. And I'm like, why would you open your mouth and say that? And then she got angry. And I'm like, my dad isn't saying anything. And I'm so I was pretty much telling her that's not, I didn't say you're right. I didn't say you're wrong, but I go, Dad is right here, sitting at the dinner table, quietly saying nothing. And in my mind, that's very disrespectful. There's no gratitude. But I'm like, where are you coming from? That, you know? And then, we got in this little fight. We separated ways and whatever. So, and then she was trying to, once I pointed out her flawed thinking, she then tried to do anger and sad and play the victim and run off. And really, all I was just saying is, you know what, Dad's right there, and he's providing everything for you. The only reason why you have the ability to open your mouth is because he's been paying your bills too, and he doesn't have to. He's just doing it. So, um, that's just an example of all of this. It's like, well, that doesn't need to be said. Do I just so I really wasn't exactly triggered in that. I was just kind of pointing things out. I was more in awareness mode. I'm like, hey, I don't know where you're coming from with these thoughts and these feelings and why you felt the need to blast off. Looking back, I know the need. I know how you had that energy to open your mouth and say what you said unconsciously because you're talking and living through your ego, stored memories and experiences, and your pain body, the emotional fuel of those mental and emotional historical experiences. So much so, you didn't realize you're in the present moment with your white father who is old and white. So the statement you said didn't match the present moment and created conflict. Then, when the mirror shone on you, that which you were unconscious of, you reacted violently because you were clearly mistaken. So why don't we look at this content? Because a lot of us go into self beat up. A lot of us will go through a shaming cycle, a self blaming cycle, an unworthiness cycle, feeling guilty. And so that is a device to stop you from seeing your own blind spot. The other device you can use is that trickster playful energy. You can go, wow, I was really not aware of my surroundings in the present moment. There's my dad who's white and old who had the money to lay down the law in the house, so then it's not hard to apologize when you're used to being grateful for being wrong. Oh my gosh, what an idiot I was. Or, brother, holy crap. Thank you for some clarity. I feel grateful for that. Dad, I'm sorry. I need to change my thinking. But when you're caught up, when your pain body is in reaction mode, so you're triggered. So maybe there was something earlier in the conversation, which I probably think there was. I think they were saying something about people in office and voting, and then she made that comment that was inappropriate. So maybe she was triggered first, and then the pain body took over, and she said what she said. While this energy is being released, it feels good. You get a high off of yelling. You get a high off of cussing. You get a high off of this bad behavior temporarily. The high is actually like a release of energy. So all this emotional stuff is just a release. But it comes with consequences because you're unconsciousness. You're not exactly aiming the gun at the right person, the right target. You're just firing off and you're enjoying the sensation. And you're blind to the people around you and the consequences. You're not thinking, so the consequences, maybe my dad is feeling really quiet because now he's gone into a self beat up cycle. Maybe he feels like he's not providing enough. Maybe he's taking responsibility, too much responsibility, for all the white men in office plus himself and his generation. And so maybe that's why he's quiet. So once it's come out of our mouth, we don't have control of it anymore. Once that energy is released into the environment, it can create us. And then so then what happens is everyone's being triggered. He said, she said. Then everyone's feeling the emotions through their pain body, and then they release whatever it is into the environment, and it goes around and around and around, and there's no evolution. There's no growth. People are just cycling, and they're unconscious. Whatever emotional state you're in is also the level of mental information you can take in. So when you're in survival states, when you're in fear state, when you're in depressed state, when you're not feeling well state, it's hard for you to receive, understand, and process information at a higher state in those moments. So our subconscious just kind of puts it in the back. We might remember it weeks later and go, I don't know why, but I remember. So my brother said, Dad's white. So maybe I'll be a little bit more conscious and not say these bigoted beliefs in front of my dad without an apology, of course, because I feel shame for being, because my blind spot was pointed out. So I see how simple, yeah, it's just a cycle. So this, in my opinion, firm opinion, is the karmic cycle. It's tied to past history, it's tied to your identity, and it's fueled with your pain body. Now, as long as you're staying in this cycle, you're creating evolutionary distance from the perfection that you are. You're forgetting and creating a whole bunch of needless, you're distracting yourself from being with yourself, from being with your authentic truth, from being honest with your feelings. You're distracting yourself, and it's also like you're losing yourself in time because you're caught up in the past. So in a weird way, you're disassociating from the present moment. So the more and more you get to the present moment, the more integrated you become, the more downloads you receive, and the more qualified you are because you're actually existing in the now, and all your lights are on, and all the information that's in this present moment currently happening on higher and inner dimensions, you're locked into, you're receiving it, it's flowing, it's working for you. But when you've disassociated yourself, because most of your thoughts are from the past, and then you might flip that and throw it forward, a fearful future based on past information, and all your emotions, they're all pre-programmed from the past. You're not present, and so you're not clear with yourself. You're not what we'd really like to call transparent. You're not being open, you're not honest, and the expression isn't clean and clear. And so you're creating karma, you're creating injury on others, you're bleeding out on others, you're redistributing the same pain and issues onto others. You're reflecting that out because you can't see it in yourself. That is the blind spot when you get caught up in those reactive feelings. So everyone is doing this to each other all the time. You can't escape it, but you can minimize it and master it, then you can escape it. But it first takes some awareness, and it might take someone pointing out the terrain, kind of giving you a basic roadmap, and then you can go, oh, now I see it. Now that I see it, I'm aware. Knowing is half the battle, G.I. Joe, right? So half the battle is now won, because now you can start to observe yourself going unconscious into a cycle of ego activation, pain body release, ego activation, pain body release. And now you can start listening to it. All these stories are affirming so-and-so's identity and beliefs. All that identity and belief is ego support, creating structure. And then all the actions, all those triggered reactions, is to affirm and validate those beliefs and ego identity. It's like a wheel, and it goes on and it goes on And it goes on. And then we say, sorry, Jenny. That was just Jenny. She's neurotic. That's just Sam. He's a loudmouth. He's just blasts off. He has anger fits. And but now you can say, oh, this is pain body activation. They're held captive. This is reinforcing ego beliefs, identity structures, uh, and it's a game that they're playing with themselves. I can now not participate. I can now sit back in the audience and watch the show. They're actually captive, not me. I am free from it. I don't need to get involved. I don't need to get triggered. Oh, I'm getting triggered. That's when I go, I must have one of those beliefs. I must have matching energy vibrations, same images, mirror, mirror on the wall. It's not who I am, but I can say thank you very much. I don't want to be this anymore. Gosh, Joe is always talking negative. Oh, I guess I'm always thinking negative. Guess he's just my mirror, right? Yeah. Now I can go, I don't like being around Joe. He's always talking negative. That means I don't like being around myself. I'm always talking negative. Let's just eliminate talking negative. Now I like myself. Now I understand where this person is coming from. And then mirror, mirror on the wall. The inner mirror matches the outer mirror. Joe all of a sudden doesn't talk negative anymore. Now we're good friends. What happened? I did. What happened? I did. I became aware and awake. Thanks all the players on the stage of life for pointing out all my blind spots. The only thing being projected out, those things that we don't understand about people, are things about ourselves. That's where our emotional body overshadows and shadows and creates that blind spot with the ego identity structures of the person who we think that we are. What is the source of light? Your infinite self, the full potential. So there is no limitation. We create limitation to create forms. So without limitation, time, there is no space. So limitation is what we actually use to create with in a field of unlimited. So that got a little. So hopefully that helps you. We started to get a little off track, going into the timelessness. But basically, this is enough. So when your partner is blasting off, you don't need to own it. You can be like, they're affirming their identity. They're affirming their story, their